In this video, we're going to show you some of the major differences between Portraiture version 1 and Portraiture version 2. It runs the same way: filter, Imagenomic, Portraiture. As it loads up, to start with, we now have a maximize in here that will actually maximize to whatever screen size you have. It'll better optimize your screen use. To start with, we have a new settings paradigm here. When you save settings now in version 2, we've got a preset name, preset group, and note. The preset name will be actually the preset name like you're used to in Portraiture version 1, but we now have the choice of making a separate group. That way you could have a group of presets that you want to all match up together for, like, say, a certain Caucasian, black skin tones, a specific wedding style or whatever, and then you can give notes to each individual preset name itself. On the preset name, there's a drop down that drops down that shows all of the preset names that are in alphabetical order. That way you may have some that you want to just reuse in the pen, like you can see here. We've just added some numbers to them and so forth. Preset groups, same way, they drop down and show you the list of the actual groups that you have available. With the notes is just a little small note editor that you could enter in a custom preset description in here. Then the detail smoothing, skin tones, mask, and enhancements are these three areas over here. You may have like a preset you've gotten from somebody else, or a preset that you've already used that you like, but you just don't want, say, the enhancements part turned on it. So you can uncheck that and it won't put any of the enhancements into it. Along with the Save Settings button, we also have a Presets button here, and it's basically a preset manager. When it comes up, it shows the preset location. This is the default install preset location where all the presets are located at. One of the nice things about it is that you can actually use the Browse button here and browse to a new location. Just say if you have a network drive on your system that you want to use, you could browse to that location, select that network drive and path, and then if you have other people that are using the system, just other retouchers or other systems on there, you can save and edit your presets in that location so everybody can share them. If somebody makes a change to one or adds a new preset, it'll show up on everybody else's machine. The checkboxes here basically selects all the ones that are under a specific group. Like custom presets, these were imported from the original Portraiture one. And we start out with a group here, and a group, when you click it, it'll select the ones down below it that you can turn on or off as you like. And the reason behind that is that you may want to just delete some of them, just that you don't really need or you don't want. You can delete them here just by checking the individual ones. And you may want to export these things. And one thing that's nice about it, we're given the ability to export them out and also to import them. And we're going to have a repository up on our website with presets from users and also some of the ones we're going to make up for you. And you can import them in and you can use them or change them or do whatever you would like with them. As we go on down here with the presets, now Dropdown Box here is a little bit different than Portraiture version 1. We've got a names only and a thumbnails button up here at the top. The names only shows you the names of the presets. These generic presets are the ones that are built into it, and you can't really change. You can load these up and change them, but you can't delete them. The custom presets, I said as before, these are the ones that were imported from version 1, and then the presets that we have with groups and all in here showing up with the actual group name and then the individual preset name underneath it, and then the note itself there, which is nice. That way you can kind of go through there and you can see what the notes are, especially if you get presets from other people and they attach notes there to kind of give you a definition of what the preset actually does. Another nice thing is you have the ability to look at thumbnails of the actual presets, and this is a real-time view of what the actual preview will look like if you apply this to it. You can see here we got different settings in here just based on the preset itself, and just like we want this enhance high key, if we click this, it's going to apply that to the image like that. So that's really nice having that feature in there, being able to see what the preset's going to look like, so you can kind of thumb down through there and you all of a sudden something just kind of hits your eye there and you go, oh, okay, cool, it's a low key, I want to try it, there it is. And along those lines here is that we also have history going on up here now. If I make any changes to any of the sliders down here, and I come back up here and I click this arrow right here beside these two, this is actually an undo and a redo. It's Control Z and Control Alt Z. So if we click here and we show this nice little running history, and it's basically limited to whatever your memory is on your system. It also works the same way as the settings with the presets showing actual thumbnails. If you click on them, you're going to see thumbnails of the history through there. So you can go back and you can kind of look at it and you say, because you know how it is in Photoshop. It seems like you always want to know what a history looks like. If you go back and start kicking through there, you got to, sometimes you get lost or you overwrite your history settings because you've only got, say, 20 history states or whatever. This is unlimited. Again, it's about the amount of memory that you have in your system. And then again, it works the same way with the thumbnail size, being able to scroll up on it. If you click one, it automatically will update over into the preview of what it will be on there. The detail smoothing area here is basically the same as I had in Portraiture 1. We got the fine, medium, large threshold, and we got portrait size here. They're pretty much all the same there. Got a few differences down here in skin tones mask. One is now we've got last use auto, and then we also have a custom. And basically the custom is when you make custom settings in there, it'll show you that right up here that you're actually working on the skin tone mask. And if you come into it and you use last use, it works just like it does in Portraiture version 1, whatever the last use settings were. But if we make changes down here, you can see that that changed up here. If I have last use and we come in here and we make any kind of a change to the skin tones mask, it automatically shows custom there. We set it to auto, same thing. Anytime we make a change here, that lets you know that sometimes you'll inadvertently hit your cursor on something and not realize you may want to use last used, or you may just want to use auto in there, and then you're sitting there maybe talking on the phone or what, and all of a sudden make a change, and then you come back and you look at that and you say, oh, I don't want custom, I want it to be auto on there. So that custom just shows that you've made changes in here on it. This on-off toggle here is for the apply detail smoothing to skin tones only that was in Portraiture version 1. It used to sit down here with a little checkbox beside it. We've just put it there for trying to save space. So basically what that does is if that's on, it's going to apply the settings to the mask itself. If it's off, it's going to apply the settings to the whole image. So that works basically the same way as the apply detail smoothing to skin tones only that was in version 1. Now another thing new in version 2 is we have the feathering here. And what's going on with the feathering is that we're actually have the ability now to kind of feather the edges of the mask a little bit. As you can see, I move in, you can see the edges of the mask are starting to feather around. This sometimes helps on getting some nicer blend modes going on in there. That's the reason that's in there. It's just basically to feather the edges of the mask if you need it. And then we also have another new feature in here called fuzziness. And fuzziness is basically selecting more or less of the skin tone mask colors. Here at 100%, with all these colors selected, if we started backing off of it, you can see that it starts backing off the colors that are selected. And sometimes this helps you really fine-tune a mask and get a little bit better idea about what's going on with it. Turn that mask back on. The hue, saturation, luminance, latitude, they're all the same as they were over in version 1. They work basically the same way. There's a little bit of difference here now with the first pick mask color dropper here. Up in the About Preferences, at the very beginning there at Skin Tones Mask, we have a mask defaults. The default latitude in the version 1 was 40, and we've given you the ability here to adjust it down or up, and that we've also kind of worked on tweaking the mask a little bit. So we normally recommend between 20 and 30 here to start off with. That'll give you kind of a little bit better selection in there without getting too much of an areas in there. And also this auto switch to expand mask color is basically the same as this switch out here, but if you turn it on in here, it'll override this one all the time. If you accidentally forget and you go in here trying to look at the mask, it's not going to pop up unless the auto expand button is selected on there. So again, it's just pretty much the same thing with the first selector, and we go out here, we have to select it. It always has to be selected. Now some people get confused. If you come into it and you start moving the cursor around, nothing's happening. You have to actually select the color dropper, move it around, and as you move it around, you'll see this another new feature over in here. It's new to version 2. You actually see a real-time view of the mask as we move the cursor around in here that's showing you what's being selected. So if I actually click on that area right there, and I go over and I look at my white mask, that's the area that's selected over here. So it kind of gives you a nice little mini preview about what's going on there so that you can get a really good idea about what's happening, where you're actually going to select everything at. The second dropper there is just expanding on the first one. So say we make a selection with the first one and we come back up here, the second one automatically selects itself just like it did in version 2. And then you can kind of watch the mask go, and then you kind of select it out. You can see it pulling in some of the areas there. You click on it, and immediately those areas, all the settings up here are applied to them. color selection box here works the same way. You can move it around. You can see the mask over there changing as I move it around. You can also grab a hold of the edges, and you'll see little double arrows come up, and then you can expand it out or in, just like that. A lot of people in Portraiture version 1 didn't even realize you could do that. You could also do that in version 1. Sometimes you can just sit there and work with a mask and use just this box right here and get you a really good selection. You could turn on the white part here, get a bigger selection, or black, whichever you prefer. And then you can just start moving it out, start watching the mask and see how it looks, or just grab the mask and move it around and see what it does. Then you can come down in here. This is a hue range here. And you can, head over toward the magenta side and see what happens, or head back off over toward the yellow side and see what happens. You can see the colors up in the box change as you start doing that. We're going to go on down here now into the enhancement section. And this is one of the places that we've made a few changes to it. And one of the most powerful changes that we made here is the ability to use mask. And basically what that's saying is that any of the settings in this enhancement here, any of these settings here, when we move these, it's only going to affect the masked area of the image. And to just give you an example here, I'm going to come back up to the first slider here, and I'm going to kind of bump up the contrast. I'm going to bump the brightness down a little bit. And then I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to look over on the side. I can see I've got this area kind of selected in here. I'm going to select it. And you'll notice now, all of a sudden, we have a much darker, contrasty area there. And what's really nice about that now is that that gives you the ability to actually simulate lighting scenarios right here inside of the software just by using the mask features. And usually you can do it here just with contrast and with brightness. So you can see here, the less brightness we give, the more that masked area. Again, that's only the area that it's working on, just that masked area there. So if we add brightness to it, it's going to brighten up that area on the cheek line. If we take it away, it's going to kind of dark it down. It's going to give some more contrasty areas around there. You could even expand it and don't even think about, well, let's go on up into the hair and let's work with that a little bit. And it can give some really nice tonal effects. You can start expanding the mask out. You can get some really nice tonal effects. And again, something like the tint, it's the same thing. It's going to work on that particular areas in there and it's kind of bleed over into the whole facial area there. So it'll kind of give it a nice, more even look to it. Warmth, same thing. This is a very powerful feature here, the use mask on there. If you turn it off, then these settings down here apply to the image as a whole. And again, you can use them as a whole and get some really nice results with that too. But we're finding a lot of people really like the ability to go in there and take a specific image and go in and start applying some tonality control to it and start getting some nice simulated lighting looks to it that it would be kind of difficult to do over in Photoshop without a bunch of layer masking or dodging and burning. The on-off here is just turning the enhancements on and off. Basically, that's all that does there. Now in version 2, we also have a little bit different output formats here. We have output to current layer, and then we have output to new layer. And whenever you output to a new layer, before in version 1, you had to run an action to create a new layer over in Photoshop. Well, that's no longer necessary now. Portraiture does it for you automatically. The Create Transparency mask, what that does is that if you check it, it's going to create a transparency mask. If not, if that's unchecked, it's going to give the results that's in the preview here, and it'll still create a new layer, but it won't have any of the transparency features to it. In other words, it won't look like the mask there. It'll just be the whole image will have the effect applied to it. In most cases, people like to have a new layer turned on and create a transparency mask, and then when they run it, the mask that's generated will show itself up in Photoshop as a totally new layer. And the other option we have is to a new document. Some people like to create two documents, like a before and after. So we got the ability in here to do that also. The Add Preview button works the same way as it does in version 1. Just every time you click it, it adds a new preview. Whatever changes you make into that preview will stick to that preview. So as you go to other ones, then whatever the changes are there, they'll show up there. So that's the same as it is in version 1. The bracketing is the same thing as it is in version 1. We've just added the extra parameters over here, like tint, and then the fuzziness and feathering on there. So that works the same way. We've added a few more bracketing steps there if we give you a little bit more options and spread on it and everything. And the replace open previews, well, whatever previews you have up there will replace them if that's checked on there. Just click OK and it builds them for you almost instantly. And then we also have over here for the previews, we have the same paradigm as we have for like the presets and the history. It shows what the names of the previews are up here. And then it also gives you a thumbnail list of them as well. So you can see that it works the same way. We're trying to keep that thumbnail list and all paradigm across there, so you can go through there and look at it like that and make your decisions based on a visual other than trying to guess it, just what the settings are. The last thing we're going to talk about is the About button. We've got a few new features in there. We've got a check for updates. We've got a check now, which allows you to do manual check, and then we've also got a automatically check for updates. Sometimes you may have some virus scanning software or some type of firewall that'll block it, so you may have to turn it off and then use the manual checker on there. That's why we gave you that option. And the preferences, we start off with skin tone masks, and we have mask defaults, default latitude. We discussed that earlier, so we're not going to get into that now. The reset button down here just resets everything back to install defaults. The interface, we now have a color theme. We give you a choice of black or silver. Some people like the silver, which is like the old PT1, and also Mac people, some of them prefer that more. The brightness is the brightness of the text against the background, as you can see. The main preview is the preview window here, and this is the area that surrounds the preview. So if the preview is smaller than what it will fit in there, you'll get this background here, and you can control from a very, all the way up to maximum white down to total black. My preference is usually about the same color as what the rest of the interface is. The thumbnail, as you can watch the thumbnail, you'll see that the background works on it the same way. This one down here. The match background with mask color. Basically, whenever you select the white mask here, if you have match background with mask color, the background will turn white. If we select black, it'll turn black. Some people like that. Some people want to see that white around there and all that. I always like to keep the interface as neutral as possible, but we do give people that option because some people prefer that. The last thing is the Performance tab, and it gives you the option of setting the number of threads for multiprocessor support. In most cases, setting to auto will work for you, but there may be some times with certain chipsets, certain processor combinations, and so forth out there that you may have to manually go in and set the number of cores you actually have in there. So it's like you have a Core 2 Duo, it'd be 2. If you got a quad, it'd be 4. If you got 2 quads, it would be 8. So that's pretty much covers the interface and what's going on there, and just a few little clues on when you're trying to beta test the software. One of the best things to do is come up here and when you bring an image in and just set it to default settings on there. And a good starting ground for an average skin tones and average smoothing and everything is to max your threshold all the way out, and then max your large area all the way out, leave your medium about in the middle, and then bring your fine all the way down. And then you want to zoom in. Basically, on the zooming in, it's about the size of whatever the image is as far as print. Like at this image at 25%, that would be the print size on it, which would be like an 8x10. 50% just doubles the size on there. You go up to 100%, you can see the real fine pore details and all. And this is one of the things you have to be careful about. It's just like anything, just like noise reduction or anything out on the web. You see people pixel peeping all the time. You go in and say, oh God, there's little hairs and there's little things here and all that. But you got to remember what your print output size is in there. So don't get just overly enthusiastic and trying to get every tiny little minuscule, blemish and pore out of there, because that's not what a real retouch is all about. So with those settings, 40, 20 over here in the middle for medium, and all the way back down on fine, come to portrait size and adjust the portrait size. If you're on large, you're going to get more detail in the image. I'll show you really quick here. If I go from large to medium, medium's going to take a little bit more of the detail out of there. If I go back here and I'm going to go to 4x6, it's going to go in there, it's going to give this really modelly appearance because it's more for a web size, something like this. It's not made for a print size. So it gives the ability for the web size. But that's going to be determinant. If you start having some really odd problems and don't know what's going on, click auto detect, or just be sure and check this. Make sure you don't have the small on and you're sitting in here blowing it up and looking at it and you're going, oh, that looks really terrible. That's just awful. It's all blurry, nasty looking. So if we go from small, we go up to medium, all of a sudden you get pore structure back in there. So that's one of the first things you want to check for if it doesn't seem right. And also on the skin tones mask, you want to make sure that your skin tones mask, when you come in here, auto just means it's going to automatically pull in the skin tones, what it thinks it is, and generate a mask. With the last use, whatever those last use settings were, it's going to bring them in there. And then the custom, what happens here is if I move any of these controls around, it's going to automatically let you know that you're working on a custom area. look at the mask, kind of get an idea about what's going on and, what's happening with it and all. And you do something like this and you say, well, geez, I'm looking at the mask now. There's nothing going on. I can't see the mask. There's nothing there. It's just a regular image. It's because the opacity slider is all the way down. Okay? That's another little thing. You have to remember that these sliders work in conjunction with each other. And also, if you're sitting here and we just make a nice, easy selection in here like this, and we see a mask in there, but then we go down here and grab the opacity slider and slide it all the way down, we have no mask there because we're letting the opacity of the mask just go down to 0, so it's letting the original image through. So just be careful about that you don't get carried away and say, well, it's not generating a mask or some kind of fuzzy look or something in the background. Check out the opacity. If you go over here to the actual image itself and you look at the show mask with none on it and you start bringing opacity back in there, that sometimes that works really good and it can bring back in some of the image and blend it in with the mask. But when you have the mask selected and you do it, it can just really confuse you. You can all of a sudden, well, why does it look that fuzzy gray look in the background? Or if you're on the black, you're going to say, well, it looks kind of muddy looking or whatever. We just slide the opacity all the way over there because we want to make sure that all the mask is showing up on it. Experiment with moving the box around, just trying to see what kind of mask it generates. You can look at the preview over here, or you can just turn it on here. If you do a dual preview, the mask will be live in real time, especially if you get it down around something like this. That'll give you a kind of an idea, basically, of what you're looking at colors in here, of what's being selected and all. And again, don't dwell on this fact about seeing if it's pulling in a little bit of areas like a little edges of hair and stuff like that. The algorithms and the software deals with the transparency levels of the pixels and all here in such a manner that these areas aren't going to even be noticeable if you go in and blow them up at 1600% in Photoshop. You're not going to see where it's blurring anything because it's just such a fine mask that's going on there. So if you get something like this and we see this really nice edge mask that's coming around the eyes, it's not selecting anything in the eyes or the eyebrows, eyelashes, or anything like that, and we start trying to work on some of the controls here, just start maxing the controls back and forth, slowly like that. Luminance, same way. Just kind of get a feel for what they're doing. Watch the box up there moving around. You see it's just moving horizontally back and forth. With the latitude, it's going to grow. Okay. With the saturation, you're going to see it go up and down. And the hue, you're going to watch this little area here move back and forth, and then you'll see the hue up in there change. Also experiment some with the sharpness. This software's actually got some of the best sharpening algorithms out there. Just experiment with some of that. You're going to find this a very subtle sharpening. It's not this really overdone thing. And it works really well when, especially on the edges of the image around here. You can see the sharpening going on around there. And it can also help bring back some of the pore structure back in here too, especially if you combine it with just a small bit of softness. And again, work on the sliders, back and forth, to see what happens when you do something on it. Try to get an idea about what's going on. Check a box on, move a slider, max it out, double click it to 0 it back, turn the use mask back on, turn the enhancements on and off, experiment with the bracketing. We're just really use the software how you, just as far as just moving sliders all over the place, and then come in and work and say, okay, I want to do a retouch on this. I want to start out selecting some shadow areas here, and I want to expand my mask on up into the face. I want to get a single preview. I want to zoom in so I can get a fairly decent idea about what's going on. I want to make this area here, I want to have a little bit more out of it, so I just click in it. Bam, there it is. And then experiment on the various layer outputs on there. If we go to New Layer, Create Transparency Mask, we click OK. It duplicates the layer, and it's normal for it to show it Portraiture there, then duplicate layer, and then Portraiture. And then look at the final output. Check and see if it made the mask in there. Take a look at the mask and see what it looks like, how the output looks. Turn the mask on and off and see what's going on there. Experiment with adding, on this layer here, experiment with adding a layer mask and maybe doing some brushing back with a brush tool and, working on and fine-tuning the mask. And overall, just work on it really hard and then give us whatever feedback you can on it or suggestions or whatever, and we really appreciate it and hope you enjoy it. And thanks for beta testing for us.